Can you imagine that the destiny of an entire career in Formula One depends on a marmot? Well, that was exactly what happened to Lewis Hamilton at the Canada 2025 Grand Prix. And no, it's not a joke. Today I am going to tell you the complete story behind one of the most unusual and frustrating episodes of the season, and that could mark a before and after in his adventure with Ferrari. The arrival of the Canada 2025 Grand Prix was not just one more date on the calendar for Lewis Hamilton. It was a day that felt like a hinge, a critical point where the past, the present and future of his career could begin to align, or fracture even more. Because beyond the glamour that surrounds the Gilles-Villeneuve circuit, beyond the 7 wins that Hamilton has reaped there, this route represented an ideal opportunity, perhaps unrepeatable, to change the narrative of his season. And that narrative, until that point, was not exactly that of a triumphal rebirth. Since he announced his surprising signing by Ferrari, the 7-time world champion had generated an unprecedented media hurricane. His change of team was interpreted by many as a legacy movement, a last attempt to return Maranello to the top and close his career in F1 with an epic story worthy of film. However, in practice, its integration into the Ferrari universe has been anything but fluid. The SF25, although it is a promising car, has proven to be extremely demanding in its configuration and very sensitive to track conditions. Hamilton's adaptation has been marked by a more steep learning curve than expected. His first races were plagued by moments of frustration, strategic errors of the wall, difficulties in finding the ideal balance of the car, and above all, a persistent feeling that he had not yet found his car inside Ferrari. Internal level, Hamilton and his engineer Riccardo Adami have been working intensely to modify the British driving style, adapting it to the character of the SF25, particularly in the curve entry phase, where Leclerc has proven to be naturally more comfortable. That's why Canada was more than a race. It was a kind of intermediate exam in this new stage, a place where Hamilton's past as an absolute dominator of the path crossed his present as a reconstruction pilot. The statistics were on their side. The weather conditions were favorable. And for the first time in weeks, Ferrari's garage showed some technical cohesion. Saturday's classification seemed to confirm that trend. Hamilton was located in a solid 5th position, ahead of his teammate, a detail that not only meant rhythm, but also emotional control and growing confidence. In the previous days, during the practices sessions, he was more communicative with his team, more proactive in the telemetry and feedback analysis. Even in the press, he began to talk about a possible turning point. Lewis himself, in statements after the quali, said he finally felt with the car in the hands. That expression so of his marks the threshold between simply driving and dominate. And it was not unreasonable to think of a podium. Not with that base. Not in Canada. What seemed to be the beginning of a redemption ended up becoming a Kafkian episode, an irony of which only Formula One with its mixture of millimeter precision and unpredictable chaos can deliver. The race began as planned for Hamilton. Starting from 5th position, executed a clean, solid output without shocks or errors. In the first laps, he kept attached to the head group, taking care of his tires, evaluating the spaces, adjusting the rhythm. The radio between him and Riccardo Adami was serene, almost optimistic. For the first time in weeks, Ferrari seemed to have aligned strategy, execution, and performance. The stop window opened, and there the first cracks began to emerge. The team's decision was clear: to extend some Turos the first stint with the aim of obtaining clean air on the track after the arrest. But in the current F1, where every second account and margins are microscopic, that calculation is always a double-edged sword. When Hamilton entered boxes, the arrest was correct, without errors of the mechanics team, but when he returned to the track, he ran into one of the worst possible situations for a pilot who comes in a race pace: slow and dirty traffic. Esteban Ocon and Alex Albon, fighting for much less ambitious positions, were right in their trajectory. None was an obstacle in terms of absolute rhythm, but its track location completely dismantled the rhythm that Hamilton had been building. Every second lost behind them was an invisible but devastating blow. Meanwhile, Oscar Piastri, who had been just ahead of Lewis before the stops, extended his advantage to more than 10 seconds. The podium, which minutes before seemed plausible, began to fade. And it was in the midst of that strategic trance, at a time where Hamilton was already frustrated by the situation, when the absurd arrived. In one of the rapid lines of the circuit, while trying to recover pace and heat in the tires, the unthinkable occurred. At high speed, it hit a marmot that had sneaked into the layout. The blow was dry, invisible to the human eye from television cameras, but brutally clear for SF25 sensors. Immediately, Adami informed him by radio, "We confirm that we see a loss of aerodynamic load in the car, or possibly damage. 20 less points. At first glance, that phrase may sound technical, even ambiguous. But in the language of Formula One, it is a competitive death sentence. 20 less points of aerodynamic load is the equivalent of running with a broken wing. It is losing almost a second by return. It is going from attacking mode to survive. And all due to the impact with an animal that has become a recurring curse in the Canadian layout. This is not a new phenomenon. For years, the teams complain about the presence of marmots and beavers on the margins of the circuit, especially in fast sectors where their appearance can be lethal, both for cars and for animals. The specific damage was at the flat background of the car, a critical area for modern aerodynamic performance. Unlike the past, where the ailerons were the main load generators, today the floor of the car is the heart of the soil effect that keeps it attached to the asphalt. A fracture, even minimal, generates imbalances in the distribution of the load between the front and rear axle. And that transforms the car into an unpredictable instrument. The car loses curve stability, traced badly in exit, and punishes the tires. It's like trying to touch a symphony with a barefoot violin. You can touch, yes, but never accurately. From that moment, Hamilton's career entered a descending spiral. It was no longer about fighting for podiums, not even containing direct rivals. The goal was to reach the end, rescue some points if possible, and prevent damage to the car aggravated. Each return was a resistance, physical and emotional test. And although he managed to finish the race, the balance was devastating. A strategy ruined by traffic, a car damaged by an animal, and a potential wasted by factors completely alien to the pilot. This was not a driving mistake. It was not a mechanical Ferrari failure. It was the type of misfortune that, in this sport, trajectories and sows doubts. Because when everything you can control you do well, and yet you sink for an invisible blow, the psychological impact can be as severe as the technician. And Hamilton knows. Therefore, when he got out of the car, his face did not show anger or frustration. It showed resignation. The expression of who understands that in F1, even when you do everything perfect, chaos always finds a way to reach you. What happened in Canada was not simply one more anecdote in the long history of misfortunes that Ferrari has lived in the modern era, nor was it just an unfortunate career for Lewis Hamilton. It was a parable-shaped warning. Even the most awarded pilots can be dragged by structural deficiencies and the whims of the unpredictable. The incident with the Marmota, which in other times would have been mocked in the paddocks, exposed something much deeper, a base fragility that Ferrari has not yet managed to overcome. Technically, the loss of aerodynamic load pledged the balance of the SF25 throughout the second stretch of the race. The damaged flat background not only affected pure performance by return, but also altered the dynamic balance of the car in braking and in medium and high-speed curves. This forced Hamilton to change his pilot style on the march, resorting to a much more defensive approach, protecting the rear train, avoiding abrupt survival, and managing degradation artificially. Each lap was a fight against physics, against the logic of a car designed to operate within a millimeter range of optimal conditions. From the strategic point of view, the team was out of course. With a damaged car, the decisions of when stopping or what a tire sets up almost irrelevant. You are at the mercy of the circumstances. And in a championship where each position adds and each tenth imports, Ferrari cannot afford to give away races. The margin of error for a team that wants to compete for titles is non-existent. And while direct guilt was not from Ferrari, the final result weighs the same in the balance of the championship. Another lost weekend. Another step back in the general classification. Another alert message. But perhaps the most delicate thing was the intangible, the emotional. Because for Lewis Hamilton, this was not just a blow to the floor of the car. It was a blow to his faith, to your decision, to your narrative. When he decided to leave Mercedes to join Ferrari, he did not do it for money or for comfort. He did it for history, by legacy. For the promise of becoming the pilot who returned the glory to Maranello. And while I understood that the road would be steep, that there would be sacrifices, that there would be frustrations, what happened in Montreal faced it with a reality that is even more cruel than defeat. Impotence. This was not a mistake that could correct in the next race. It was not a piloting failure that could study in telemetry. It was a blind, irrational blow, out of all calculation. And that type of episodes erodes the trust of any pilot. Even that of a 7-time world champion. From now on, every race weekend will be dyed by a silent question. What unforeseen other can we ruin the plan? In the championship, Hamilton moves away from the head group, not due to lack of rhythm, but for an accumulation of factors that he does not control. And if this trend is repeated, If individual efforts continue to ship in the ocean of the unforeseen, motivation, that spark that makes the greats legends, can begin to go out. The Canada 2025 Grand Prix will not be remembered for spectacular overtaking, a brilliant strategy, or an epic struggle for the leadership. It will be remembered by a marmot. And although this sounds absurd when he says it out loud, the truth is that the incident encapsulates a much harder and more painful truth. Even when a team prepares meticulously, when a pilot executes everything with surgical precision, chaos still has the last word. In Formula One, as in life, the most talented, nor the most fast. Sometimes who manages to survive the disaster better than the rest. And that's why I invite you to reflect. What should Ferrari do from now on? Shield your car against these unforeseen events? Reinforce the internal morale of the team? Redouble efforts in the reliability and technical structure of the SF25? And more importantly, do you think Hamilton must continue betting on this long-term project? Leave me your opinion below in the comments.